later in the week. And then at this point, also, if you also want to receive a certificate for this webinar, if you could please contact me at the end of the webinar, and I will put my email address in there so that you can request a certificate for this. And at this time, I'm going to introduce Marcella Movitt from American Institutes for Research, who will introduce you to our speakers. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Adult Education Providers and Career Pathways, Insights from 3 Cities, which is part of CALPRO's Research-Based Practices initiative. The goal of this webinar, as with all webinars that are part of CALPRO's Adult Education Research webinar series, is to engage practitioners and researchers on topics relevant to adult educators in California. With us today, we have 2 wonderful speakers, Dr. Carol Clymer and Dr. Esther Prins. Dr. Clymer is a research associate in the College of Education at Penn State University, and she's the co-director of the Institute for the Study of Adult Literacy and the Goodling Institute for Research and Family Literacy. Dr. Clymer has 40 years of experience implementing and evaluating programs to improve the education and employment prospects of low-income or low-skilled individuals. Dr. Prins is Professor of Education in the Lifelong Learning and Adult Education program at Penn State and co-director of the Institute for the Study of Adult Literacy and Family Literacy. Dr. Prince's primary research interests are adult and family literacy, and she has worked on numerous projects both in the United States and various countries around the world. So, as you can see, they're both experts in the field, and I'm very excited to have them with us today. And with that, I'm sorry, Patty, I hope that the volume issue has been resolved for you at this point. And I will now turn it over to Dr. Prins and Dr. Clymer.
Hi, everybody. This is Carol Clymer. I hope you can hear me. It is great to be here today, and thanks, Marcella, for this invitation and opportunity to speak to our colleagues in California. We have a simple presentation, but a lot of information. We're going to provide a quick overview of our Institute for Education Sciences funded research practitioner partnership project, where we mapped career pathways programming in Chicago, Houston, and Miami. And then we're going to provide highlights, you want to move the slide, of the findings for our survey, which also included, our research also included focus groups and case studies. And then we're going to offer you some opportunities throughout for interaction and discussion with you. Move the slide. So here's one of those first opportunities. In keeping with our goal for interaction, we have a quick poll. Career pathways means a lot of different things to different people, and we want you to tell us what your views are on career pathways by checking all of the comments that resonate with you. Esther's going to have to help me be able to see this because it's too little for my eyes. Oh, now I'm seeing it a little better. Looks like a great way to help adults achieve their education and career goals is coming in first.
Well, it's still changing.
Yeah. Oh, now it's changing a bunch, isn't it? Okay. We have a tie. 82, right? Oh, no, 88 wins out. Important for getting workforce education, adult education to work together is the winner. And a close second is a great way to help adults achieve. And then we go to a necessity in today's economy. And next, lots of work, but worth the investment. That is well put, I think. And the latest buzzword and lots let's see what else. This one, employment is important, but what about other student goals? Okay, that was very interesting. Anything else, Esther, you want to add about those results?
Nope.
All right. So the next slide. Yep. So I want to just kind of briefly say who was involved with this project on our team. Esther and I also worked with Blair Wilson-Toso. I'm sorry to say that she's gone on to another job in Las Vegas at the Public Education Fund, but she put a lot of work into this project. We also work with Chicago Citywide Literacy Coalition, Becky Raymond and Alex Siskin there. And then at the Houston Center for Literacy, Sherry Foreman-Elder, who's the president and CEO, and Martin Loa worked with us. And then at Miami-Dade County Public Schools, Mark Needle worked with us as well. And so here's a little bit more about our project. It was a 3-year Department of Education, as we said, IES Research Practitioner Partnership Grant from 2015 to 2018. And I just have to say, it's really rare to get adult education IES grants. So this was a really great and unparalleled opportunity to do research and shape practice in our field. We had 3 different aims. First, we wanted to understand how adult basic education providers in high-need cities are integrating career pathways into their services, especially for immigrants and adults with barriers to education and employment. We also wanted to identify which student outcomes measures are most extensively used and any metrics that are used within across cities. And then also to understand how successful programs design and implement their career pathways. This was really the first study to map the landscape of adult education career pathways in Chicago, Houston, and Miami. And because there are a lot of definitions, as I said before, we used CLASP's definition. But I think before we show you what that is, we'd like to hear from you. And if you can write a sentence in the chat pod about what the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of career pathways, just anything that comes to mind. What does it mean to you? All right, thanks, everybody. Steps to reach a goal, a map to a career, including education and basic skills development, transitioning to employment, a shorter educational pathway and less expensive route to jobs, short and long-term plan of how I can reach my ultimate career goal, a map with many ways to reach an endpoint, having a plan to attain your goal, health professions, aligning students' interest, educational background, life experience to a career in our area. The next step or steps for a student in regards to pursuing a higher credential or a better job. 2 or more courses, including academic and technical rigor. Pathways for employment with multiple entering points and multiple exits. Multiple entry and exit points, those 2 similar ones there. Series of courses that lead to an employment sector, career goal, including the education and experience, entry-level jobs leading to end career, and then transition services to achieve a career, not just a job. So it's a pretty complicated set of activities, and I think you guys have covered a lot of the nuances of what are in career pathways. We use the CLASP definition in our study to kind of guide and anchor our findings and results. And so CLASP's definition is it's an approach that connects progressive levels of basic skills and post-secondary education, training, and supportive services in specific sectors or cross-sector occupations in a way that optimizes the progress and success of individuals, including those with limited education, English skills, and/or work experience, in securing marketable credentials, family supporting employment, and further education and employment opportunities. And the part of this definition that we really honed in on in our work is the access and the opportunities for those with limited education. Our study is all about finding out how those with limited education, English, and skills can access career pathways. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Esther. She's going to talk about our findings.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just briefly going to talk about the research methods that we used. I won't read all of these research questions because you have them right there, but this shows you what kinds of methods we used for specific research questions. And so basically we were interested in the key features, the outcome measures, the policies and practices that shape career pathways programming and coordination, and then how selected programs through our case studies design and implement career pathways, and which ones seem to contribute to student success. Okay, so briefly, we began with a survey of all of the adult basic education and literacy providers in Chicago, Houston, and Miami, and we compiled what we thought was the most comprehensive list that we could. 147 ended up responding, which was a 72% response rate, and that is really phenomenal for social science research. We asked about the 2014-15 program year. And I just want to give a caveat that because of a lot of data inconsistencies, the student characteristics and outcomes are rough estimates. And that in itself was a learning experience because we learned that a lot of programs don't necessarily have the capacity to track complicated data. Secondly, we conducted focus groups with 18 providers, 5 to 7 per city, in each of the locations, and these were identified by survey respondents as well as our city partners, and they had also reported successful career pathways outcomes. Finally, after that phase, a year ago, we conducted case studies of 6 exemplary programs, and this involved doing class observations. We completed 44 interviews with 56 people across all the sites, and then did 1 focus group with students at 3 sites. So anywhere from 3 to 13 students attended those. And we collected a lot of documents from each of the programs. So this table shows you how we selected the case study organizations. So we tried to make sure that they had diverse occupational sectors, that they served students with lower levels of education, that we included the main adult education types in each of the cities, and that they serve different populations. And so here you'll see the different occupational sectors that the 6 organizations covered. Although some of them did cover more than that, but these are the ones that we were considering. So if it has a yes, it means that that was part of our research study. If it has an X, it means that they offered, for example, manufacturing, but we decided not to focus on that class for our research. Then the next section down, you have the organizational type, and then the primary populations that they served. And again, all of this will be available to you, so you don't need to write all this down or memorize it. All right, so first of all, I'd like to review some of the key program characteristics. First of all, the most common agency type was a CBO, representing 58% of all the survey respondents. I should note that Chicago City Colleges and Miami-Dade College submitted only 1 survey each, and they have multiple campuses. So the percentage of community colleges is a bit misleading because of that. The other category included homeless shelters, correctional facilities, and so on. And interestingly, nearly half of all the CBOs in the survey were located in Chicago. So it was clear that they have a really vibrant CBO culture in adult ed. And then all the school district adult ed programs were located in Miami, which reflects the very different ways that adult education is organized in different cities. So although CBOs were the most common agency, they had the smallest median number of participants. So you see that the libraries and post-secondary institutions had by far the highest number. I should note that one of the libraries in Texas reported a very, very large number of adult learners, and so that may have been somewhat of an outlier. But point being that CBO programs tend to be smaller on average. All right, so now we're going to go back to the same class definition, and this is actually a survey question that we asked. So according to this definition, does your organization offer career pathways? So if you could take a minute now to respond to this poll, we'll see how your responses compare to our survey respondents. Okay, we're waiting for a few respondents still. Okay, we've got 15 out of 21. So it looks like so far we've got 81% who are saying yes and 19% who are saying no. So, okay, yes, this per the comment that Maria made, this is sort of an ideal type. So we recognize that organizations may not pronounce all components of that definition. Okay, so your responses, oh, actually now it's 82% of you said yes. So that is very close to what we found for our survey. We found that 83% of our respondents provided career pathways services according to that definition. And there were not any statistically significant differences by city. You'll see that we also asked if they had career pathways in development. So if you count that, it was well over 90% that either offered or were planning on offering career pathways. So we asked about the targeted employment sectors, and you'll see here the ones in the orange box were the ones that were most common. And so that was education, child development and family services, health and medical technology, and information technology. And then all the other ones had at least one organization that was providing services in that area. Okay, so I want to go now into some program snapshots. And one of the things that I think you'll notice is that there is incredible variety in the ways that career pathways are designed and implemented, both within and across the cities. And again, I'm not going to go over every cell here, but I'll just walk you through it. So if we start with the left column, we have the occupational sector that they focus on, and particularly that our study focused on, the primary goal of the program, the primary components of their career pathways class that we studied, what kind of enrollment they have, if it's open or cohort, how long their classes last for the career pathways that we focused on, any credentials, certifications, or other key outcomes, and then their key instructional and support staff. So not administrators, but the people that would actually be interacting with students. And so I've got 3 organizations here, and the rest will be on the next slide. So we have Jane Addams Research Corporation, which focuses on manufacturing, Chicago City Colleges, and we focused on the Malcolm X College, which is one of their 6 campuses that provides adult ed, and they do health contextualized career pathways there. Then at Alliance Multicultural Services in Houston, we focused on their CNA and AutoCAD classes, and they are a refugee resettlement agency. So one of the things you'll notice is that I've highlighted in orange the goal of financial stability. And so this is something that several organizations in our study had as their focus. So not just job placement or post-secondary education, but all of these, you'll see in their key instructional and support staff, had employment coaches, financial coaches, and or job developers who helped participants achieve financial stability. And they really provided much more comprehensive wraparound services to ensure that that would take place. So everything from credit building products to other things that I'll be talking about in a few slides. So I'll go now to the remaining organizations, Avance and Chinese Community Center. This was a partnership with Houston Community College with their community-based job training program. And so HCC, Houston Community College, provided the curriculum and the occupational instructor, and the CBOs basically did everything else. They provided the basic skills instructor, they did the recruitment, enrollment, the wraparound services, and so forth. Then Lindsay Hopkins Technical College is part of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, so it's part of the official school district. They have, nearly something like 18 to 20 different certification and certificate and licensure programs, and so we focused on just 3 of those there. And then finally, Miami-Dade College does a lot of career pathways, but we specifically focused on a grant called FICAPS, Florida Integrated
Career Advancement Program?
Something like that, yes. You can Google it.
Academic preparations.
Yes, that's right. So that was a special grant-funded program that would dual enroll students in a GED class and in a career technical class. And so they, during the year that we did this research, they were focusing on manufactured construction or TramCon, business, and health, which we did not focus on for this study. And so they had a goal of serving 30 participants through FICAPS for that program year. So again, you'll see in terms of financial stability that Chinese Community Center is the only organization out of these 4 that had that as a goal. And so accordingly, they provided employment, financial, and income support coaches. Let's see, so there's a question here. Interested to know what online GED programs some of these agencies are using. The only, let's see, Miami-Dade College, did they tell us what kind of online class it was? I don't think they gave us details. They just said that it's online. So that's the students have to go to the online class because otherwise they might have a schedule conflict with their CTE class. So Miami-Dade College does have face-to-face GED classes, but it's really difficult for students to be able to do that and go to the TramCon business or health CTE classes. But I don't think they told us what their online GED curriculum is.
I don't believe they did.
They did have like a backup support teacher in the room, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's not that students were completely isolated necessarily. Okay, so yeah, I'm happy to take questions about any more of these things toward the end. But again, this will show you the sheer variety in how career pathways are organized in these 6 organizations. Okay, so one of the things, again, as Carol said, that we were interested in is what kind of access students with lower levels of education or who are immigrants or have other barriers to employment and education, what kind of access they have to these programs. So we did find that agencies offer a really wide constellation of classes and services. On average, they were offering 7 kinds of classes. And again, these are not all career pathways. These are all of the classes that they offer. So ESL, employability, and classes for transitioning to post-secondary were the 3 most common. However, we had a list of 7 kinds of classes that we consider to be core career pathways services. And so you'll notice these are the ones underlined in orange, with the exception of classes to transition to post-secondary. All of these were much less common. So, for example, classes combining basic skills and CTE was at 54%. Apprenticeships were only 16%. And so this suggests that the non-core career pathways classes may be more common. So interestingly, when I looked at, okay, of all the agencies that said yes, according to this class definition, we offer career pathways, over a third of those agencies had no students enrolled in the following 6 classes of transitioning to post-secondary, obtaining a post-secondary or stackable credential, and so forth. And so for our research team, that raises some questions about the robustness of career pathways. So if these, types of classes are considered essential to career pathways, then what does it mean that someone says that they're offering career pathways but not doing any of these kinds of classes? So we also were interested in the NRS level for the students, and this is one of those pieces of data that should be taken, not that these are very rough estimates because of some data inaccuracies, but the overall point is that a very large percentage of career pathways students are at low, intermediate, or below ABE or ESL level. So you'll note low intermediate, high beginning, low beginning, or beginning ESL is a really high percentage. And then we also have a high percentage of low intermediate, beginning, or beginning ABE literacy. However, despite those low NRS levels, more than 50% of the classes or services that these agencies offered have grade level, test score, or language entry requirements. And so these were most common for classes to obtain an industry recognized credential, for classes leading to specific job opportunities, or for obtaining a post-secondary or stackable credential. Okay, let's see. Hang on, let me go back here. Somebody had some questions on the previous slide. Okay, this is interesting. Why do you think the percentage for advanced high intermediate ESL is lower than the other ESL levels?
Oh, maybe Miami.
I'm assuming that it's because they are just happening to get immigrants in the door who are more beginning ESL students. That wasn't something that we probed about, so I'm not sure I can say much more about that. Okay, so yes, back to this other slide. So yeah, the overall point for this slide is that the majority of classes have some sort of entry requirement. So to give you a better idea of what the entry requirements are, I have a table here. So for agencies that did require a high school or GED diploma, they had a minimum TABE score of anywhere from 5.0 to 9.0. And for those that did require a high school or GED diploma, in one instance, students were placed in a high school equivalency or ESL class that had no career content. At Alliance, the regular ESL class didn't have career content, but the Burlington English distance education was career-oriented. And I'll get back to this other question in just a second. So this table shows you with the 6 organizations, is a high school diploma or GED required? So we have about half and half. And then what the TABE requirements are, So I'll just point out a few examples here. So Malcolm X has a 3-tier program. Career Foundations is for students with 3.0 to 5.9. The Bridge program, which is what we focused on, is 6.0 reading and 5.0 math. And then Gateway is for students who have at least a 9.0 reading and 8.0 math. And so it's a graduated system. An interesting thing to note here was Lindsay Hopkins, which for their general automotive program did not have any entry requirements. Instead, they had exit requirements. And so students could either score a 9 in reading and language and 10 on the TABE in math, or they could pass industry certifications. So that struck us as a really innovative way to help provide access to students and then give them a functional and not just testing way of showing their capabilities at the end. And then the last row is whether there's an opportunity to earn high school equivalency through the organization and whether that's a separate class or part of the Career Pathways program. So let me just go back to a couple of these questions on the side here. Did you find alignment between content standards among ESL programs? We weren't really studying their ESL programs per se. We were studying their Career Pathways programs, some of which may have had an ESL component. So that really would have been a separate study. The previous slide was just one of the survey questions about NRS levels for ESL students.
Esther?
And yeah, yes.
Sorry, earlier there was a question about what online GED programs some of these agencies are using. I don't know if you were planning to answer it later. I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah, we already talked about that.
Sorry about that.
Yep, that's okay. Yes, okay, so I think we covered that. Okay. All right, so bridge classes we found can help students actually be better equipped for CTE classes, and this came out especially at Jane Addams Resource Corporation, where nearly every person we interviewed among the staff said that students who took the bridge classes were better able to do math and more motivated than students who tested high enough on the TABE and enrolled directly in the manufacturing classes. So here's a quote from the Business and Workforce Services Director. "You can do well on the TABE test and not really know math and reading that well, particularly math. One of the biggest differences is that people who go through our bridge program really come out knowing math on a much more competent level." And another instructor said, "I've come to see with some of my bridge students because they've been here a little bit longer, they have a little bit more motivation and a little bit more drive than someone who fast-tracked in the manufacturing classes without actually going to bridge." And so we thought that was very interesting because it suggests that going through a bridge class isn't necessarily a detractor or something to slow people down, but can actually help them succeed more compared to students who just go directly into the manufacturing or other occupational class. So, let's see. Yes, what exactly do you do in those bridge classes? Okay, at JARC, the bridge class, again, is for students who, let me go back a couple slides.
Sure.
Okay, Carol is pulling this up for me.
There you go.
Yeah, so the bridge class is for students who are between, it depends, between 5.0 and 6.9 or 5.0 and 8.9, depending on which manufacturing class they want to get into. And so it's a contextualized math and reading class. And they really work on getting their TABE scores up.
They also, I think, work on focusing very diagnostic, what the individual needs to work on and what they don't know, so that they're in a group, but they're also doing individual work on things that they haven't gotten before.
Yeah, and it's a 12-week, 192-hour bridge class that they have. But again, every organization, structures it differently. But at this particular organization, that's what they were doing. Okay, so support services. We've got another, somebody had a question, whether the class size was smaller. They do have fairly small classes. It is all open enrollment at JARC, and so they use a lot peer support and tutoring as part of their instructional model. At any one time, they could have probably between 5 and 15 people in their bridge classes. So yes, it is fairly small and personalized. This was one of our survey questions about what kinds of support services your agency offers. And so we'll see how this lines up with our survey respondents. Some of these are not exactly support services per se, but more program structures that help make it easier for students to attend, like flexible scheduling and alternative class times. Okay, so we'll give people a few more seconds to finish up. Okay, looks like people are mostly finished here. So, somebody just broke the tie. All right, so alternative class times and locations is the most common. And again, that's not exactly a support service, but that was the umbrella that we used. And then career counseling and planning is second. Some of the other top ones are job search assistance or placement, childcare, financial support from the organization, college navigation support. Okay, so yeah, there's a wide range. At least 1 or 2 people provide each of these. For those of you who wrote other, can you just type in the chat what kinds of services that includes? Okay, a couple of people are typing. Okay, career track ESL courses. Okay. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I'll move. Same thing. Okay. Personal counseling and referrals, college tours, placement tests on site, and it looks like computer skills. Yeah, that was also common at the organizations that we studied. Okay, so I'll show you now what the support services were for our survey. Tutoring and other academic support was the most common, followed by alternative class times and locations, and job search assistance and placement activities. So the reason for the asterisks is that when we analyzed compared agencies that said, yes, we provide career services versus those that said, no, we don't. The ones with asterisks were significantly more likely at organizations that provide career pathways. And so you'll notice that these are largely focused on employment and post-secondary. So that's probably not surprising given the focus of career pathways. So the most consistently mentioned in our focus groups were case management, career counseling, wraparound services of various kinds, citizenship and immigration support, and then assistance with transition to post-secondary programs and employment. Something that also came out strongly was an organizational philosophy of meeting students' needs. And so here's a quotation from a provider. "We have a philosophy of trying to meet the student where the student is at, which means that if the student needs the citizenship or the job or the drug counseling, or if the student needs the domestic violence referrals and case managers, so that we feel if the student leaves, there's something that we didn't do." And so you can really see how comprehensive this is, and why a case manager would be very, helpful in an organization that has that philosophy. So one of the arguments that we've been making as a research team is that support services are crucial for increasing students' mental bandwidth. And I have some references on this concept at the end of the presentation that you can look up later. But what's striking is that these researchers that I've cited here have done experiments showing that when people are given a cognitive task, like in an experiment, and they're asked to think about financial problems, that is the equivalent of losing a full night of sleep in terms of their cognitive performance. And so if we think about students in career pathways programs who are trying to study with the incredible financial insecurity and other problems that they're dealing with, it becomes very clear why providing support services would be helpful for helping them to focus on academics rather than the problems they're facing. So a JARC participant essentially said what I just stated. He said that due to the organization's support services, we don't have to stress about all those actual life problems. All we have to do is concentrate on our schoolwork. It takes a big burden and a big load off the mind when you don't have to worry about that, and you just concentrate on the schoolwork, which is very helpful. And so he's basically, right here defining this concept of mental bandwidth without ever having heard of the concept. So the Center for Working Families director, which is their wraparound support service organization, noted that JARC provides bundled services so that students can focus on the end goal, which is to remain in training. And that is, definitely what came out in our focus group. So just a little bit more about comprehensive supports. The organizations that provide bundled services are using national models. So the Center for Working Families at JARC is a national model from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and it's required for all the manufacturing students. It involves access to income supports, financial literacy classes, financial counseling, employment coaching, and a bunch of other supports like transportation are available through JARC. And the amazing thing is that all of these services are available even after they exit the program for the rest of their lives. So you can see how that would contribute, incredibly to financial stability. The other national model that we found was in Houston at two of the organizations we studied, Alliance and Chinese Community Center, and that is the Financial Opportunity Center, which is funded by LISC. And there, students have to choose 2 out of the 3 services that I listed there. And you'll note that it's quite similar to the Center for Working Families model in terms of access to income supports, employment coaching, and financial coaching, and then access to financial services. So the community colleges in our study, the interesting thing was that even though students weren't taking credit classes, that they had the same access to supports as credit students. So tutoring, wellness, disability centers, the gym, library, computer lab, and all of that. And one of the striking things, particularly at Miami-Dade, that we heard over and over was how being located at a college really helps these career pathways and GED students develop a college student identity. And so one of these staff members said that continuing education students, quote, like being on campus. You get a student ID, you get a parking decal, you have all the same benefits that the 4-credit students do. They're so excited. A lot of them tell you, I never thought I'd be going to college. And now I'm on a college campus and I have my student ID and they can go to the gym. It's a big deal for them. This was almost verbatim what students said in the focus group. So here are 2 quotes from students. One who said, "You feel like you're in college." another who said, you have your student ID, finally a college student. You go to class regularly, you have your books, you have the other students with you, you walk around, go downstairs to the cafeteria, you see other people. You feel like you're doing something with your life. And so there was something very important about being located at a community college and having access to all those same supports in terms of shaping how they saw themselves and the possibilities for their future. Incentives were also helpful supports. Chicago City Colleges, for example, as part of the Bridge and Gateway programs, offers 1 or 2 free credit classes. In Houston, there was a program that gave monetary vouchers for passing GED tests. JARC offered financial incentives for obtaining a job, retaining a job, and so on. And then there was an organization in Miami that worked with inmates where they could have their sentence reduced for attending and completing CTE courses. So some of the gaps that we noted were that in many cases, because organizations are cobbling grants together, certain students fall through the cracks. So the grant may only cover tuition and supports for particular students and not for others. And so they had to really be resourceful in terms of how they tried to put things together, and dealt with a certain amount of frustration that, you know, there were certain students who simply weren't eligible for particular financial support. Also, at one organization, a couple of organizations, the case managers, counselors, or transition specialists had enormous caseloads. I think in one case it was, 250 to 300 students per person. And so, these people walk on water, but there's only so much, that one person can do with such a large caseload, which speaks to the need for more funding. Yes, so in terms of student identity, someone commented that in California, some students don't feel comfortable going to college campus. Yeah, so certainly there are advantages of, both kinds of models of being located at a college or being located at a CBO. I think the question is, how can programs, regardless of where they're located, help foster that identity of someone who sees themselves going places in life, and as someone who is capable and deserving of going to college.
You made a comment on that.
Oh, yeah.
Other thing.
Okay. So we want to end up, we're quickly running out of time here. I'll go over this quickly on outcome measures. So the lack of common outcomes is a stumbling block to measuring, comparing, and documenting progress across programs. So we found that there was no single measure that was used by all of these survey respondents. Educational level gains came close, but even that was at 85%. Getting a high school or GED diploma was second, and then initial employment was third. And again, the ones with the asterisks were more likely at agencies that said they provide career pathways. So we use class categories to measure interim outcomes and then long-term outcomes. And the reason interim outcomes are important is that they help capture the smaller gains and achievements that students make. Because we know that for a lot of adult learners, getting a job or going to college is years in the future, or maybe, not in the future. And so being able to capture the interim or intermediary achievements is really crucial. And so this shows what percentage of agencies were using these particular measures. I'll just skip to this slide right here, which shows, so you can see here that on average, only 32% of agencies were using one or more of the interim outcome measures, compared to 37% for the longer term ones. So this suggests the need that we maybe need to do a better job of capturing those interim outcomes. All right, so we've got 10 minutes remaining. We've got 3 questions here. Which findings surprised you the most? what's one way you can apply what you learned from today's webinar, and any other questions that you have.
And while you're typing in your responses, I just want to mention something about the community college comments that were made. I think what is interesting, the community colleges that we visited where the students were really feeling good, is I think those colleges had made an effort to try to make the students feel good. So I hear your point about some colleges don't, but these colleges really did, and it showed.
Yeah, and there was at our focus group with students in Chicago at Malcolm X, we asked about, did you see yourself, going to college before this? And I mean, there were only a few women in the room, so, this isn't a large sample, but, they said that they really hadn't. And that's the whole goal of that bridge program, is getting them to take a credit class in their second semester so they can get a taste for it and take it for free. So you're removing the financial barrier, you're removing pretty much, all the barriers to being able to take a credit class. So that they can feel like that's something that might be in their future. Oh, whoops. Okay.
We can't.
Oh. So let's start. I realize people may still be typing. So Elaine was happy about successes. Others, how good students felt about attending a class on a college campus. The cognitive impact of financial concerns being equal to losing a night of sleep. I really encourage you to read some of the articles that I posted at the end in the references about the mentality of scarcity and the mental bandwidth concept. It's really, really fascinating research, and organizations nationally are beginning, I think, to pick up on this in terms of the need for wraparound support services and how that can really help someone focus their mental energy on things other than, financial and other problems outside the classroom. Yeah, so the making the exit requirements the focus, that was really distinctive. That was the only example we found of that. I don't know if that's the case at other organizations across the country, but it's a nice way to have a competency-based requirement rather than a test-based requirement. Okay, so let's look at the application and some of the ways that people are thinking about doing that. Offering bridge classes, appropriate incentives for benchmarks, having to choose 2 services. Yeah, so at all of those Center for Working Families and Financial Opportunities Centers, those supports are mandatory. And the reason for the bundled services is that research has shown that students are more successful when they do participate in at least 2 of those. That was the rationale that was given to us. Yeah, so these, in terms of Chris's comment about partnering with CBOs, we didn't really get into that here, but all these organizations have multiple partnerships. Lindsay Hopkins was doing some really interesting work with homeless shelters. I think, does Miami have one of the highest homeless population rates in the country? That seems to be... Remembering
what it looked like, I would say they do.
Yeah, and so they had some really innovative work with homeless shelters, homeless students by state law in Florida do not have to pay tuition for adult ed or career technical education.
Yeah, I don't think we talked a lot about this, but it was on the bridge slide. The Chicago City colleges had this really neat partnership with the women employed who were offering the lower level bridge classes. So
Right.
women employed is maybe more like an intermediary, but they offer services with CBOs all over the city. And so they were going into the neighborhoods to offer that first, really lower level bridge class. And then helping the students get onto the city college campus. That was a really, I thought, innovative way to do something across a city.
So for the interest of time, I'm going to move to the questions. Oh, what just happened?
You hope.
Okay. Let's see, questions. What we're doing is an articulating 1 credit course in our non-credit certificate program, so students are introduced to our credit campus, the training program, and faculty. Since the class is articulated, students pay no tuition to take that credit course because they register non-credit students. Yeah, great. At Lindsay Hopkins in their automotive program, because it involves national certifications from the Automotive Service Excellence organization, for every certification they complete, they can earn 3 college credits at Miami-Dade College. And so they can earn up to 24 college credits if they complete all 8 certifications. How many cities and programs you researched had non-credit certificates to career pathways? They were all, other than those that had articulation agreements, they were all non-credit.
Yeah,
Except for with the bridge program at Malcolm X, the bridge students took 1 credit class in their second semester, and then with the Gateway program for the higher level students, they took 2 credit classes.
The FICAPS program was trying to move into the credit classes,
Right.
but they were really just starting to launch that program. So there weren't, I think if some students would have gotten into the TramCon class, then they would have been in credit classes.
That's true. I think for TramCon also, they were able to transfer credits, and the business classes were credit certificates.
But the Houston Community College was all done through continuing ed. Now they may be changing that there, we just heard. So they may be not working through continuing ed anymore, but things change.
Let's see. So I don't see any other questions. Under application, someone had said that they would be focusing on interim outcomes, offering cohorts on the main campus versus an extension campus, Burlington English, and another comment about the benefits of being located on a college campus. Much more detailed findings are available on our final report, or I should say full report on the survey findings. We're still working on the report based on all of our data, but on our website, adultpathways.psu.edu, you can find our report on the survey and previous presentations that we've done. We've got some references here, and I think that's our last slide. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Esther and Carol. And I'm going to put it back on this page so that all of you, before you leave, can jot down Dr. Prince's contact information if you want to get in touch with her and ask her any further questions. I want to thank our speakers. You did an absolutely fantastic job, and I know that I have learned so much and gotten so much out of it, and I'm sure that all of our attendees did as well. Before you leave, if you would like to receive a certificate for attending this webinar, please email Jennifer. She provided her contact information in the chat pod. And we ask that you complete the evaluation form so that we can work to improve these webinars. And sorry, one more note. I wanted to mention that the PowerPoint can be downloaded in the bottom left-ish corner of the page. So with that, I'm going to just say thanks again to our speakers and to all of you for attending. And we hope to see all of you again in our next webinar.